Kalief Browder was unlawfully arrested and detained for 3 years in Rikers Island. But before I get into today's case, trigger warning, today's case is just awful. This story is so heartbreaking, it's infuriating, it has physical violence, emotional abuse, torture. Viewer discretion is advised. So today we're diving deep into the story of Kalief Browder. He's a young man that was unlawfully arrested and was taken to Rikers Island, and his journey through the criminal justice system was just unbelievable. Like, at this point, I didn't believe that this was a real story. So Kalief was born on May 25th, 1993. At birth, Kalief was taken to the Child Protective Services. His mom couldn't take care of him and the rest of his siblings. Altogether, there were like 7 of them, Kalief being the youngest. And his mom was addicted to alcohol, drugs, and battling with addiction. It's quite hard. So they were all put up for adoption. The foster mom loved them all to bits. Bendita, she was raising children from the foster care system for many years. She collectively fostered about over 34 children by the time it reached 2015. The family resided in a 2-story brick home on Prospect Avenue that is located next to the Bronx Zoo in New York City. Kalief then enrolled in New Day Academy in the Bronx, where the staff described him as a fun guy and very intelligent. Kalief's personality was, he was a sweet young man. He was very kind. He has those big, kind eyes. Nobody had anything bad to say about him. However, on May 15th, 2010, Kalief was at a party. There's no evidence whether or not he was drinking, but who cares? It was late that night and he was planning to walk home. And as he was walking home, a police officer came out of nowhere and accused him of committing a crime. Allegedly, Kalief stole a backpack that was filled with valuables. By valuables, what was in the backpack was an iPad, a phone, some other personal items. This witness that remains anonymous, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but this witness claimed that Kalief stole a backpack and made a run for it. And this witness was a student in a nearby university and they needed their belongings back. The police didn't hesitate at all to blame Kalief without any evidence, and he was quickly snatched and taken into a police station. What's so infuriating is that the witness made so many mistakes within their statement. They were getting the dates mixed up. They were getting the times mixed up. At one point, it was 2 people that robbed him. It was just random at this point. But nobody believed Kalief and he stayed against his will. So for a fact, Kalief was just thrown into prison and they just threw him in there, threw away the key, and he ends up serving over 3 years at Rikers Island. So the prosecution had no trial and it was postponed. And when I tell you his trial was postponed, the witness wouldn't show up, they literally threw him away like garbage and locked him away, threw away the key. And this is just not a regular prison. It's really not. It's a place where no rules apply and everyone has to fend for themselves. So let's circle back to the witness. This person skipped town and there was some chitter chatter about him being in Mexico. This witness just fled to Mexico. So Kalief's in Rikers Island and this place is described being a place worse than hell. If you're in Rikers Island, you have no choice but to fight. You have to fight for some sort of status symbol. You need to fight in order to protect yourself. You need to fight in order to have a name within the prison. If you don't fight, you'll be beaten to a pulp. Within Rikers Island, all of the guards, the CO, the inmates, everybody's corrupt. Everybody is just out there causing harm, chaos, and destruction. So Kalief was held at the juvenile section because he is below the age of 18. And when I tell you, oh my God, these teenagers were called animalescents because every day getting jumped was a daily occurrence. And what did the guards do? They just allowed them to attack one another. No rules applied. An example of this is when a inmate called Annibal, he was only 39 years old, was found dead in his cell. He was telling the CO and the guards and the prison warden, everybody, that he was suffering from chest pains. He had a horrible, sharp pain in his chest, and nobody listened. People assumed that he was lying, he wasn't telling the truth. And before you know it, they found him dead in his cell, inside solitary confinement. He died from a heart attack. So back to Kalief, his interrogation was very hard to watch because it is like every correctional officer, every interrogator, every police staff really didn't believe him. No matter what he says, they were constantly grilling at him. They kept asking him the same questions, hoping for a different result. They were just trying to hope for him to slip up, basically. They would ask him questions like, are you sure you were sober the night you allegedly stole the backpack? And he'll be like, I didn't steal anything. I didn't rob nobody. What I respect about Kalief is that he stood his ground throughout the entire 3 years. He didn't admit to stealing the backpack because he didn't. He was completely innocent. But some people would just plead guilty in order to go home. But he didn't want to tarnish his name, his record, so he kept saying it over and over again. I didn't rob nobody. It wasn't me. I didn't do anything. I'm innocent. Kalief was beginning to feel a mix of confusion and disbelief. He was asking himself, like, why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this? You know? He felt like he was in a game that he didn't understand, leading to feelings of powerlessness and despair. He felt completely blindsided to this whole situation. He kept asking himself, why me? Why me? What have I done to deserve all of this? He was only 16. Let me remind you, he was only 16 years old. And he's just thrown into this environment where no rules apply and you need to protect yourself. Everything is overstimulating and intense. Oh God, could you imagine? It's everybody's worst nightmare. Kalief said, and I quote, I was just a kid. I didn't know what was happening. So Al Sharpton, he is a civil activist. He's quite famous. He was part of the documentary and he mentioned that being part of a deposition is the most stressful thing you could ever go through, because it's not really about finding out what has happened to Kalief within Rikers Island. It's about how they could discredit you. So a deposition process is something that you don't want to get yourself into because it is highly stressful. It is grilling, debilitating. They put you under a spotlight and everybody in that room is trying their very best to discredit you. So many terrifying things happened to Kalief while he was in prison. His head was bashed in, he was spat at, he was starved for days on end. He was completely isolated and placed in solitary confinement for a very long time. How long, you may ask? Over 1,000 days. And mind you, he's still a teenager and his brain is still developing. He's still going through bodily changes. And being in solitary confinement, it will ruin you. It will take away your sanity. You will lose your mind. It didn't matter whether or not Kalief was handcuffed, sleeping, completely defenseless. He was going to get attacked no matter what by anybody and anyone. It could be a correctional officer, it could be a policeman, it could be the guard, it could be the other inmates. There are no safe spaces in that prison. Even if you're locked in the cell, you're still going to deal with some sort of harm. So while Kalief was in a deposition meeting, they were asking him terrible questions, whether or not he was involved in a gang, what grades he got in kindergarten, whether or not he had an issue with drugs or alcohol. They were trying to find things that would discredit him and his complaint against how he was treated within the prison. So Jay-Z was part of this documentary. He did meet Kalief at one point, and he was advocating for him. He was supporting him, and Kalief was, trying to find ways to find justice and reform and so on. But before we get into all of that, let me tell you how Kalief felt within the prison walls. Kalief realized that being in the prison is a daily struggle, and in order to survive, he needs to fight and so on. However, as he was defending himself, it could be anything, he was thrown into the box. And what is the box? Solitary confinement. As you could imagine, Kalief was born into the system, and he's been thrown into the system yet again. He is finding no sense of peace. He's feeling hopeless. He's supposed to have a fair trial, but it was pushed back. They would give lame excuses like, oh, the witness is missing. We couldn't find the witness. The witness didn't show up. The witness didn't answer their phone. And they kept pushing it back month after month, year after year. And while this time gap is happening, Kalief is rotting away in Rikers Island. He is just being tortured emotionally, physically, all kinds of ways every day. He didn't know what could happen to him. It could be his last day on earth. He could have been beaten to death. It's like so many other inmates. It is such a debilitating feeling. So after 3 long years, Kalief finally was set free. And when he left the prison grounds, in his mind, he was still in prison. He didn't feel happy anymore. He was battling depression, and he tried to get his life back together. He enrolled in a community college. He tried to advocate for prison reform. He went to so many different talk shows and talked about his experience. And he also filed a civil lawsuit against the DA, the state of New York, everybody he was going to come after. Once he left Rikers Island, he was only 21 years old. And mind you, he missed out on his prom, he missed out on his high school graduation, and he was feeling so sad because of that. And obviously everything that he went through. Kalief and his mother, Vendita, went to the media, and they were talking about everything that has happened to them. Everything that the guard, a prison officer did, what everybody was doing within Rikers Island, what was done, what wasn't done. He was going to expose them all. He was going to take everybody down. However, Kalief spent a significant amount of time in solitary confinement. It took a toll on his mental health. It really did. The social isolation was literally messing with his head. Kalief said, and I quote, "It felt like I was losing my mind." So while Kalief was in solitary confinement, he lost a significant amount of weight because the correctional officers would bring him food that was already eaten and touched up by other inmates. So he decided to not eat at all. I mean, could you blame him? Within his cell, whilst he was serving in solitary confinement, there were feces on the walls, there was broken glass, there was mice, and the temperature was either too warm or too cold, depending on what season it was. He spent over 1,000 days in solitary. Over 1,000 days in solitary confinement. Like, it is inhumane for that to happen to anyone. Could you imagine? The silence within that room is deafening, and the crippling loneliness, and whether or not a correctional officer could walk in and beat you to a pulp. Everything is a very unpredictable, unsafe environment, you know? Every day was torture for Kalief, and there was a point where Kalief was trying to take his own life, and the correctional officers were like encouraging him to do it. And when he attempted, they brought him down back to the ground again, and they decided to beat him. And Kalief runs out of his cell to make sure that the cameras could capture everything the correctional officers are doing. And it was caught. he did get the evidence. Let's move forward to Kalief being released and back to his home life. Kalief was still walking around in circles. He was still trying to process his trauma. He did go to therapy. He did try to get help, but he said that he feels like a 40-year-old man and he's only 21. And you could see it in his face that he isn't happy anymore. He isn't with us anymore. He is just surviving like he was from the very beginning. And he doesn't know how to function anymore. I mean, could we blame him? Kalief said, and I quote, "I thought I was free, but in my mind, I'm still in that cell." So as Kalief was trying to reintegrate with his family said that when Kalief came back and we tried to get back to normal, Kalief continued to isolate himself. He continued to keep himself to himself. He wasn't talking to anyone. He hardly said anything. And when people are speaking to him, he will either nod yes or no. He told his childhood friend that he would see him in the nearby future. Kalief couldn't see a future for himself. He was just so sad. He wasn't the same anymore. He wanted to be that joyful young man that he was before, but that person is long gone. And in 2015, he spoke to his friend and his friend told him like, "Oh, I'm glad you're out of prison, blah, blah, blah." They were catching up and his friend left. Everybody went to work that morning and this led Kalief being all on his own. So despite everything that was happening with Kalief, his past continued to haunt him. He was still fighting all of the trauma, all of the nightmares, all of the awful things that happened to him at Rikers Island. Even when he's asleep, he's back in that cell. While he's awake, he's thinking about it obsessively. I mean, could we blame him? He was completely traumatized and he spent so much time in solitary confinement. Solitary confinement, I could make a video on it by itself, but it's designed to strip you from everything that gives you comfort. It's prison times 2 with a sprinkle of hell. It is so debilitating. It drives you mad. You will become depressed, paranoid. You will hallucinate. You will slowly lose your mind, or sometimes it happens all at once. It is just so sad what has happened to him. It's inhumane. It's a obstruction of justice. It's a disaster. Back to the family gathering. So the whole family got together. They were like celebrating. "Oh, Kalief, you're free," whatever. All of his friends came by. They had like a small get together. There was food, music, whatever. Kalief, like I said, was isolating himself. He wasn't participating. And as soon as his friend told him, "Oh, I'm glad that you're out and I'll see you soon. Take care of yourself," blah, 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 everybody left, okay? I'm not sure where the family went, but they probably went somewhere nearby. Still, Kalief ended up being home alone and he was just contemplating everything. I'm not sure how he felt at that given moment. I wasn't there, but Kalief made his way upstairs and then he tied a rope around the air conditioning unit and tragically took his own life. He was only 22 years old. Many people are responsible for his death. So many people, from the judge to the wardens to the person that was pushing back his court date, his trial date. Even though his death was marked as a unaliving, it's the system that killed him. His bail was at $3,000. He came from a family that were of low income, just like many people that were living in the projects, and his bail was abnormally high. And his mother did as much work as she could. She was working nights and she was trying to raise the money to bail him out, but it was just too much. And she managed to collect around $900, which wasn't enough. Mind you, Kalief was innocent. He was completely innocent. They have ruined him to the point where everywhere he looked, there was nothing but devastation. He just couldn't see the good in anything anymore. And it's not his fault. It's the system that did this to him. People that attacked him, that harmed him, that beated him for no reason. Being in a environment like Rikers Island ruined many individuals. There are so many young men in that prison that are held without bond, and they are being treated worse than an animal. So I got my information from the documentary. I should have mentioned this at the beginning. It's called Time, the Kalief Browder story. So the author, Michelle Alexander, she is a civil rights litigator and legal scholar. She wrote a book called The New Jim Crow: Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. I would highly recommend. I have read her book, and this will help you understand more about the system and what goes on behind closed doors. And this is the heartbreaking story of Kalief Browder. I thought the story should be told because of, you know, the mass injustice that Kalief's family went through, and Kalief himself, obviously. It is just so sad. This video was very hard for me to record because it is just so inhumane what has happened to him. And I normally cry behind the scenes, but I just couldn't believe this was a real thing. The only silver lining I could see is that the family did sue the state of New York, and they were giving a settlement of $3.3 million. But no matter how much money that they gave, it won't bring Kalief back. And guess who showed their rear head as soon as the settlement money was mentioned? Kalief's biological father came about. As soon as the danger was over, he showed up. Only for financial gain. I mean, I didn't need to say that, but it's obvious. Rikers Island is still open to the public today. Unbelievable. They made plans to close the prison once and for all in 2027. However, they keep pushing it back, because it takes a lot to shut down a whole prison, you know? And so many people have died, you would think that they would have done it by now. In 2025 alone, people have died within the prison. It would be either they've been beaten to death, or they've died through starvation, or they've died through being locked in a hot cell and they just collapsed and the organs shut down. Some of the inmates were poisoned with rat poisoning. I don't know how to end this, to be honest. Please do let me know who you would like me to talk about next week. Thank you so much for sticking around. I know today was a long video, and I do appreciate you guys. So please do stay safe and hydrated, and I will see you guys in my next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.